This program has been approved for one IDCEC CEU. To receive credit for this program, please submit your full name, IDCEC number, program class code, and your summary essay to CEU@IIDA.org. The program class code is located alongside the title of this program on the IIDA Academy page. For a certificate of completion to use toward another certifying body, please submit the same information to CEU@IIDA.org. Thank you.
All right, looks like we've got a big chunk of the folks who registered, so I'd like to get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this third session of our February IIDA Chapter Leadership Council. I'm so glad to have you all here with us. My name is Ryan Ben. I'm the Director of Association Experience, and we have a really terrific program today, Leadership in the Virtual World. We have four incredibly talented experts with us today to talk about leadership in a virtual world. I'm going to ask that they join me right now on screen, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Beth, can you get started by introducing yourself to all of our attendees?
I'm happy to do that. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Beth Harmon-Vaughn. I am a retired managing partner from Gensler. I retired a couple of years ago, moved back to Kansas City. And I guess I really wasn't intended to be retired because here I am. I'm a workplace strategist for an architectural firm called Gastinger Walker, and enjoying kind of a, I don't know, second career perhaps. I'm a member of the Mid-America chapter, and I'm a past president of IIDA. So I'm really happy. I haven't spoken to the CLC for probably 25 years. So I'm excited to be here today.
That's awesome, Beth. Thank you so much. Monet, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Hi, everyone. My name is Monet Redmond. I am the Director of Member Services here at IIDA headquarters. Happy to be here today. This is my first CLC since joining IIDA, and happy to talk about leadership in a virtual world. I've been, I guess you can call me a leader for about 11 years, especially in my previous role. So very happy to discuss this topic with the rest of the panelists and all of you guys.
And everybody in the chat should give Monet a special shout out because Monet jumped in for a panelist who had to leave last minute. So say thanks, Monet, for doing this. We really appreciate it. Erica, can you introduce yourself to everybody for us?
Sure, thank you. This is my first CLC. I'm new to IIDA as a board member. I'm the VP of Advocacy for the Indiana chapter. I'm excited today to talk about leadership. I'm the Interiors Department Manager for Apogee Consulting Group, which is a national firm.
So thank you so much, Erica. And last but not least, Deborah, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Everybody, happy to be here. My name is Deborah Nemeth. I am the Interior Design Discipline Leader for Smith Group in Chicago, and I am the Vice President of Professional Development for our Illinois chapter. I'm really thrilled to be here to discuss this really pertinent topic with panelists today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all of you. I really do appreciate you joining me today. Deborah, I want to get the program started with you. I think we'll mostly focus on the positives of this new hybrid environment today, but I do want to start with some of the challenges. So could you share with us some of the challenges you see your firm facing right now, and maybe a couple of ways you've been addressing them?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we're all facing is really how do we develop emerging professionals, develop students that are going to be joining us hopefully shortly here, and how do we make sure that they receive the tools and the techniques and the guidance that they need. So I think, you know, it's important now more than ever to make sure that we are connecting to students, whether they are interns at our company, whether we're reaching out to our alumni groups and getting connected to our alma mater. I think it's really critical to kind of make those connections and help them foster different skills and development within their early professional career. I think kind of one of the other real key pieces that I think is a given is just the tactile nature of our industry. You know, I think when we all left to work from home in March, we're thinking to ourselves, how do we teach? How do we mentor? How can we sketch these details? How do we look at a palette? So I think that's challenged all of us to really think outside the box in terms of how do we communicate? How do we collaborate? Using tools like Bluebeam, for example, I think, we all have to really make sure that we're on top of things and proactive. I hardly use Bluebeam at all when I left in March, and now I'm using it every day. So I think making sure that we're challenging ourselves to learn new tools, learning from those that are younger within our firms that can kind of help teach us and guide us as well, I think is just as important.
Yeah, that's all really, really valuable to hear. I really appreciate it. Beth, I want to jump to you. You have such an interesting purview, having been in the industry for so long. What challenges are sticking out to you right now as unique to this moment, and how are you addressing them?
Well, I would agree with the comment on technology. There's a lot of things that we've all learned to do with technology. Isn't that an amazing thing? And learning new tools and tricks and techniques and all of that. However, I literally gave a presentation to a CEO a couple of weeks ago. He was in an office 20 feet away from where I was sitting. And this particular presentation was being broadcast all over the world to their board of directors. And that's all fine. And we've all done that before, I guess. But being able to actually feel and touch and experience the pieces of material is very hard to do on a Zoom call. So I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is, you were talking about emerging professionals. What about emerging clients? We don't often meet clients as a client the first time. We often meet them in other settings, or you get to know them or their business a little bit. And I think it's really hard in this day where there's so much physical separation, really meeting your prospective new clients and developing them, and developing that relationship. And so that's something that I think is taking a lot of extra effort to make that happen. Because eventually, if you're just working off your own network, that's going to dry up a little bit, I think, as time goes on. So
yeah, I really appreciate it.
You want to keep expanding that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really valuable. And I love that spin on that. Beth, how are you all doing that right now? How are you trying to keep that client process fresh or new, or how have you been addressing it? Just curious.
Well, one of the things is we've been sort of overtly joining boards when there are opportunities to do so. And, those aren't necessarily things that you just get to create, but there have been several opportunities over the last year to join boards that have really interesting business people on them from all, that they could easily be clients at some point. And I think continuing to, not that we wouldn't have done that anyway, but that's really been a good way to get to know people and work on things together, and have a reason to somehow get together that's not exactly my normal pipeline or way of doing that. So that's kind of been one thing. It's trying to be out in the community as much as you can be out in the community at this point in time.
I think that's really smart. I love that. I'm so glad I asked, because that's really valuable and it's very tangible. People can really look for those opportunities and join them. Erica, I want to flip. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying also, if you can publish something in the local business journal that's your area of expertise, so that people understand, oh, you know about something that now I know I need. I think that's another way to do that too. These are things that we've always done, but
yeah, but you're right. I mean, it takes extra energy right now to maybe focus on these things. They're not happening as accidentally anymore. Whereas you might do some of this randomly, or it might just happen by chance. I think being more active with these moments is really good to hear. Erica, I want to jump over to you and kind of flip the coin. What are you seeing as the opportunities right now? I think we've talked about some of the challenges. What are your opportunities, and how are you meeting them and expanding on them?
For me, I think it's just really investing in your team. And, because we have kind of just a different setting, helping them emerge. And like Beth was mentioning, joining boards, attending events like this. This is a good example. And, I'm just doing a lot of research. I'm, TED Talks, reading books, and talking with other leaders. I think is very important to see, and not just in our industry, but in other industries, what are they doing? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to, keep everything going. And I think it's really just talking to your staff. If you are not all in the same office, you got to really be talking to them and investing in them and finding out what is it that they're needing. It's easy to just say, oh, we're all in different offices, but if you are in different offices, you got to act like you're in one office. So.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I appreciate that. Monet, for you, what are you seeing as some of the opportunities for advancing leadership, changing leadership, thinking about it differently?
So I would say the largest opportunities available right now due to the pandemic is access to trainings and conferences that were unattainable or difficult to get to pre-pandemic. As a new mom, I was very hesitant to travel and leave my son at home to attend conferences. But now that's not even a worry anymore. I can log into a training that's across the country or, on the other side of the world if I wanted to. So having that access is a huge advantage and opportunity right now that leaders can capitalize from. And I just think it's amazing. Like, I'm very involved with the association world. So ASAE, I'm always on their website looking for trainings that I can sign up for and just log in on a Zoom. So I feel like that's the largest advantage and opportunity right now for leaders.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I feel like I'm watching a lot of changes happen for a wide variety of reasons when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But that inclusion word to me is so different right now. And I think it has so much to do with access and what Erica was talking about, of like really meeting people where they are, having more honest conversations about what they can do, what they can't do, what their situation is. I think all of that is good, and it's happening because of this moment that we're in right now. Deborah, I want to jump over to you. What if some best practices have emerged for you during this time, during this virtual hybrid world? What have you been doing? What have you been not been doing? Can you share with the attendees?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great question. And I think something that stayed true, regardless of this virtual environment, is just taking the time as a leader, as a mentor, to slow down and make the time to talk to your team. Their success depends so many times on us. And I think I've learned the most and had the most impact from my own mentors that have been accessible to me, that have just taken the time to carve it out and chat, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I think it's so critical. There's nothing worse than being on a team and you can't get a hold of anyone and you're struggling to figure out what you need to be doing or what the answer is. And so I think just making that time is so critical for people to feel included and understood. I can't stress that enough. And I think, the other thing too is, as the pandemic has stretched on, I think at first we were we transitioned to this virtual world. We wanted to be efficient in and out of these virtual meetings, right? But there's something really to be said for spending 5-10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting and just asking people how they are. How are you doing? And really just engaging in a dialogue about themselves personally, I think is just so valuable. I've done that more and more recently. And, I think it just fosters connection among you and your team and helps the team connect to one another, which we all need right now. And another thing too, I think over communication. I can't stress that enough. Yes, you may speak with somebody about something on a virtual meeting, but follow up with that email, follow up with a personal call if you need to. If you're using Teams, send the communication through Teams, because people want to feel connected, and it's really difficult being separated to feel connected to the mission, to feeling connected to the firm and what you're doing. So I think just the more that we can communicate, I think it's just super critical.
Yeah, those are really valuable. I want to ask you just about one of the points you brought up, making yourself available to people. The audience we have on this call, as you all know, are chapter leaders. So they're volunteers on top of their day jobs. Can you maybe just share really briefly like the boundaries that maybe you have set up so you can both be available and say yes to a lot of this, but also not burn out, I guess is maybe what I'm wondering. Because I see people nodding their heads, but I'm sitting here going like, how do you do all 4 of the things you're talking about doing?
I think it's really critical. And for me personally, it's all about that prioritization and allowing enough wiggle room in my day to accommodate these conversations. So, I may have a list of 5, 6 things I want to do, 2 or 3 of them I know I have to do, but the others, they might be able to push off a couple days or even a week. So that gives me kind of the flexibility to make time for those conversations. And I think the other thing too is email. I think especially all of our types of Teams communication chat, it can get really overwhelming. And so I really try to be conscious about scanning my email at the end of the day and, just addressing the most pertinent things. And again, looking to prioritize what is the most pertinent, what can wait, and making sure that, even if I don't have time to respond in totality, that I just respond and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, let's set up a time in the next couple of days, or I promise I'll address this in the next day. So I think, really understanding priorities, how you can shift things, I think is really kind of critical to open your schedule for those couple of, key conversations that you might need to have throughout the day.
Yeah, that is really, I think that's really, really helpful to hear. Erica, I saw you nodding your head a lot, so I just kind of want to jump over you quickly. What best practices are you implementing? Is a lot of that familiar? Can you share anything else that's a little unique to you or different?
I think for me, it's really putting my staff first. And not only my staff, but, as a department head, there's a lot of people that may not necessarily be under my team, but that are, support. And it's making sure that they're getting what they need so they can move forward. I don't ever want to be the holdup. And so just, like Deborah was saying, is if that means I got to move something to the end of the day, that's fine. I'm kind of bad because I, my team, we're very close, we're texting, we're teamsing, we're emailing. I don't ever want to be that barrier between them being able to do their job. And so we're messaging at 8 o'clock at night, and it's because I know they're working. And so I make that extra effort. And also because we have offices in different time zones. So we have staff in like Las Vegas. Well, that's 3 hours behind us. So I know that 8 o'clock my time is 5 o'clock their time. So I need to make sure that I'm available. And I've kind of always done that. There's a very blurred border there, but it's very important that my staff feel supported and that I'm available whenever they need to. I mean, I do, like say if I'm in a meeting, like, hey, I'll get back to you in 5 minutes or whatever. And if you don't hear from me, you get back to me. Because you can easily get sidetracked. So, and this is not a new thing. This is kind of how I've always operated. And, but you really have to make sure your staff knows that you're there for them. So I think that's what's important.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Monet, can you share a little bit about what you're seeing as best practices right now? I have the benefit of working alongside you, so I have an idea of what you might say, but I'd love to hear your expertise on this and have the attendees hear from you too.
Erica and Deborah pretty much summed it up. I wanted to definitely focus on my team, and that was my answer to this question, just being present, being available, being transparent with your team. I'm new to IIDA, so when I make a mistake, I'm quick to let the team know, look, hey, I messed up. So let's move on. Let's figure out how to, move forward from this. Meet with your team often, either once a week or bi-weekly at the most, depending on the needs of your team. Offer individual meetings if interested. Some people work better one-on-one, some people work better in a team setting. So kind of you have to be a little bit more personable and understand the individual, understand how that person works, understand their style of work. And do it in a way that they don't feel micromanaged, of course. Make sure that you know who that person is. Make sure that you understand their home life, because IIDA, we're working at home, understand like what sort of stresses they may be encountering at home. Do they have a dog or a needy cat, or do they have a toddler or a 4-month-old like you, Ryan? Like just really understand what happens during the day for that person. Like, do they wake up and they're alone? And it's just so many different scenarios that we have to just be aware of and be conscious of as leaders. Another thing is to encourage your staff to take time off. That has been huge during this pandemic because your office is right next to your bedroom or wherever. You can just log into your laptop, and we tend to overwork. So encourage our staff. You have 50 hours you need to use to before you lose it before the end of the year. Encourage them to take that time off and log off at 5 o'clock. Yeah, I can go on and on, but all advocating for them. Make sure to be their voice when they're not in the room, because now we're on Zoom, so you have to be the voice for your team. So those are a few of my best practices for.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of that. I think the best leaders right now are not ignoring what's behind the talking head in the Zoom, because now we get to see what everybody's little world looks like. And I'm watching leaders be very adept at making sure that that 2-year-old that Monet has, Ryan, is a part of the conversation sometimes, because I think it's important that we have this window, this very specific window into people's lives right now, and to just ignore what that looks like is, I think, a failure. And it's good to hear that everybody kind of is doing that. Beth, I want to jump to you because I think we're inching towards this idea of mentoring right now. And I think being available to other people and talking about transparency and making sure that you're there for your staff. What does mentoring look like right now in this hybrid environment for you?
Well, I think that the thing that we've lost a little bit, mentoring happens in the studio every day, one-on-one, 1,000 times a day, right?
Yep.
And when we're not in the studio together, even though we're online and virtual, we are losing something. And one of the, I'm sure we're all doing some version of this, but the value of the virtual coffee, or to actually make a time where you are sitting down with people, not just maybe oftentimes it is on a project, but that's still mentoring. I mean, there's still an exchange and there's an opportunity to learn and to teach. But also to be fairly deliberate and very much in the moment. And I think we've all kind of said a version of that because we can't take that for granted anymore because we don't see each other every day. In fact, there are people that I haven't seen for 6 months. So in person, I mean, so I think that's one of the things. And just to touch on one other little thing is, there's been a real blurring of the lines between our personal life and our work life because many of us are working from home. And I have personally found, you guys have been incredibly generous as you've talked about this, but I've also found I need to sort of put some boundaries around that because there for a while, the phone was routinely ringing at 10 o'clock at night. I also work across a lot of different time zones. And finally, my husband kind of said, you're talking to this person in Phoenix more than you are. So I think it's also important to just be respectful of the fact that you do have a family, whether it's children or dog or husband or wife or whatever, a partner, we need to make time for those folks too. So
I think that is really good to hear. I think it's really easy to push towards one end of the spectrum, and having you share a little bit about the freedom that you can find in putting up some boundaries. I think it does afford people an opportunity to be better leaders when you don't have to be a leader for 24 hours in a day. It means the 10 hours you can probably be a little bit more effective. I think that's really helpful to hear. Erica, how about you? How are you mentoring folks? I know you're participating in a lot of like student programs and things like that in your area. So what is it looking like right now for you?
Yeah. I think it's kind of, what Beth is talking about, it's making that time and really, I had something yesterday where somebody had some things that I needed to work through. So instead of just sending them some markups, I actually said, let's sit down, let's go through them virtually and explain why I marked up what I marked up, you know, and then they get it. And so it's not so just static, you know, and it's that personal connection that I took the time out to sit down with them and explain to them versus just shooting them an email and say, hey, fix all these things. And they weren't even one of my designers, I was production. I'm kind of reading through all these comments that are on here. So I think, you know, some people, I just want to comment something somebody put on there really quick. You know,
Please.
I think it is that we all, you know, someone mentioned, you know, we don't all have it together, you know, we all the time, you know, and that's okay, you know, and what I tell myself all the time is, you know what, you know, if your dog needs to go to the vet or something happened or whatever, all I care is you get your stuff done. You know what, whether you're doing it at 10 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock, whatever, that's really all that matters, that we are serving our clients. And we can be adaptable, and you know, and yes, people have kids and dogs and cats, and kids have appointments still, and they have sports, and they have school, and they have e-learning, and so we are just doing the best we can. And I think that's always been a thing. You know, we've been able to hide it a little bit more because we're not on a Zoom all the time, and that's okay. You know what, we do what we got to do to get done what we got to do, but as a leader, it's communicating that to your team. So, you know, it is about transparency. That is a big word. And in my opinion, if you are a good leader, then you can be transparent and your team can be transparent to you. And just be supportive. I mean, who cares if you're doing your work in your pajamas, you know, like just you're doing what you got to do to get your stuff done. If your client's happy, then you should be happy. So.
That is awesome. Yeah, put that on a t-shirt. I think that works. That would sell, I think. Deborah, I think you have a unique vantage point on this question. So I just kind of want to pop over to you for just a second. What are you telling people who come to you? I mean, you have the VP of Professional Development role with Illinois. When people talk to you right now about career growth or how they might better themselves or advance, what direction are you giving? What kind of advice are you giving people?
You know, I think it's really critical to take the time to listen in your career, regardless of where you are. You know, whether that's listening to your peers, whether that's listening to your superiors, or even your young team. I think, you know, sometimes you just need to step back and listen, and be willing to allow others to rise to the occasion, because I think in turn, that makes us stronger leaders, stronger mentors. And it goes back to what we were talking about advocating for our teams, right? I think that's really kind of critical to build people up, help people develop their leadership skills. And I think another thing too, you know, seek out feedback, be open to feedback, ask for feedback. I think we can't grow and develop without feedback. My very first job out of college, I had a fantastic boss at the time, and she was all about it. She said, ask for feedback anytime. We're all open book here. And I think that, you know, that's the way that you learn and grow, and you can kind of tweak and make changes. So I think that that's really just critical. Have those dialogues.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate hearing that. I want to jump over to where the four of you are finding inspiration right now. I want to hear a little bit about where you all are filling your well up. What resources, tools, how are you showing up so strong each day? Monet, I'll start with you. Where are you finding inspiration? How are you filling up your leadership well?
Well, I would say I watch others who I look up to. I see them doing webinars, I see them thriving, and I'm like, okay, I can do that too. It gives me a little bit of inspiration. Also, self-care is very important. So I make sure to take the time to assess how I'm feeling. Okay, did I have a week full of anxiety? Okay, let me go to the spa. Let me go take care of myself for a little bit. So just being self-aware and not burning yourself out is very, very key and very critical. So also I'm here for my team. I want to be a sounding board for my team. I have an entire association of leaders, you all looking to IIDA for guidance, strength. So I make sure to step up and give everything my all when I can. And going back to the mentor topic, when it comes to finding a mentor, it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal process. Like, you don't have to deliberately go up to someone and say, can you be my mentor? It can happen organically with monthly coffee, Zoom invites. You know, Beth kind of touched base on that. Just, you know, offer that person, you know, you can send them a gift card and offer, you know, get 15 minutes of their time and pick their brain. Just so that you can stay inspired as a leader and look up to that person and find best practices within an individual that you look up to. People like to talk about themselves, and they will give you that time, soak up all that information from their challenges and ask questions, and also keep in contact with them. That's another key. Follow up with them and make sure that you're keeping in contact with them. So my inspiration, to sum all that up, is pretty much making sure that I'm taking care of myself, and also looking up to individuals that are doing the same things that I'm doing. So
Beth, where are you finding inspiration right now? How are you filling up your leadership well?
There's two things. One, this is the first time in almost my adult life that I haven't been teaching at the university. And that's always been a great source of inspiration, working with a variety of students, all with a different point of view, all interested in a lot of different things. It makes me read broadly and all that kind of stuff. And also have the opportunity to travel a lot. And that's not there either. So a funny thing happened on my phone, and I'm sure it happens on all of your phones. This thing shows up called Memories. And what I started to realize is I was really enjoying the memories. And there was something that inspired me to take a picture when I took the picture. And so it's kind of a weird little thing, but it's sort of giving me an opportunity to look at the places I've been to and the things I've seen in maybe a little different way. So that's kind of one sort of fun thing. The other is I've gone back and reread a few books that I have found to be especially interesting. And one in particular is The Power of Design by Richard Farson. And I hope all of you've read it. And if not, I hope you'll take an opportunity to read that book, because he reminds us why what we do as designers is so important. His point of view is that that place and space is the largest driver in human behavior. It's more important than your heritage and your upbringing and all of that. He was an environmental psychologist. And even if you just read the first 3 chapters of the book, it's worth the read. So there are a few other books like that whatever really got you excited, maybe when you were in school, even if that was just a few years ago, you might enjoy that. And somebody's asked to repeat the name of the book. It's called The Power of Design by Richard Farson. And Richard himself, he passed away recently, but he was quite a fellow too. It would be interesting just to learn a little bit about him. Then there's also master classes and all other kinds of things that, you know, if I had more time, I'd probably do more of that. But so there are lots of places to get inspiration.
Beth, I love hearing the memories moment. I think that's really cool. I think it's really easy, I think, to maybe just dismiss, like, when you settle on an Instagram post or a memory or an old photo, but like taking the time to critically think about why that was inspiring or why you took it or why you think it's interesting. That's awesome. And that takes like 10 seconds. That's such a great piece of advice. I love that so much. Erica, how are you finding inspiration right now?
So I'm huge in LinkedIn, and also in like Pinterest. For probably about the last 3 years, I post an inspirational quote on all my social media every single morning. And I've done that, yeah, I'd say about 3 or 4 years now. And so I spend every Sunday night, I get on Pinterest and I go find all these quotes. And they're quotes that I can put on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And that honestly is a lot of inspiration for me. You know, I think about what's my theme for the week and what is it that I want to post on, and finding all that really kind of just, you know, revs up my engine for the week. And also on LinkedIn, there's a lot of purposeful leadership, and there's a lot of different groups on LinkedIn. So I kind of do that. And then I watch TED Talks. I'm reading a couple different books. and just kind of seeing what's out there. You know, any kind of CEU that is on leadership, any kind of training, I'm just grabbing it. Like last year, I think I had to count up, I did like 26 CEUs. So, and I would say maybe half of those are just on products. Like I'm going out there and actively finding, how can I learn more? You never know everything. You cannot absorb enough information. And it has nothing to do with the pandemic. It has everything to do with what's going on, just being a leader.
I mean, that's fantastic. I also like that if anybody's not sure where to start, they can just follow you for inspiration and you will have enough for them to get started with. That's
Sure.
awesome. That's great, great, great. Deborah, can you finish this out for us? Where are you finding inspiration right now? How are you filling up your leadership well?
Yeah, absolutely. Erica, I agree with you. I've been leaning really heavily on LinkedIn. I think there's, you know, because we are so disconnected to other people within the industry, our peers, it's a great place to go to see what people are up to, what are they doing, whether it's leadership or project related, or, you know, just facts that you need to know. I find myself feeling really connected utilizing that network of individuals. So I've gone to LinkedIn, you know, found myself going there a lot more frequently. You know, and I would say that I'm also finding inspiration from my own mentors, and just kind of observing them, how they're navigating this climate, and really taking note of that and trying to implement things that they're doing, strategies, techniques, into my own leadership and mentorship tactics. And I think, Erica, again, you might have mentioned something earlier, you know, also finding motivation with other groups that I belong to that really are driven kind of by the same motivation that I am, in terms of, you know, that connection, the collaboration, idea sharing, you know, understanding all those important components. So I think really kind of tapping into like minds, I think really kind of helps to fuel and keep me excited about mentorship and leadership and feeling inspired.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. I have two more questions I want to ask the panel, and then we've got a couple questions that have trickled in through the chat and the Q&A. I want to save some time for those. My second to last question for all of you is just practical advice that you could give people attending the webinar today. You know, it can be something you've already said that you want to just put a finer point on, but just some practical advice you have for leaders right now navigating this hybrid online world. Beth, can I start with you?
Sure. I think that to be fairly deliberate and thoughtful about what you want to learn about, because when you start to go down that path, you're going to find other things you also want to learn about. But one of the great things is there's so much out there to resource now. We've all talked about that. But if you want to learn how to cook eggs, because I don't eat eggs and I don't know how to cook eggs, so I actually got online with a world-renowned chef who had a way of making eggs. With all this stuff that's been going on in our national political scene, I wanted to learn more about the Constitution. And Harvard offers free classes, I think Princeton and Yale do as well, on the most amazing range of topics. They're free for the most part. And so you can learn about whatever your topic is from people who really know about it. So figure out who's the person in the world who's the best, because 25 years ago, we would have no access to Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whatever. We do now. So, and maybe it's not one-on-one, but you can see their latest TED Talk. You can go to their master class. So I think that there are lots of ways that we can do that.
Yeah,
that we couldn't even.
That's terrific. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Erica, what is a piece of practical advice you have for those who are attending on leadership?
I think it is really just that word transparency. Be transparent with your team, and then also be transparent with your leadership. You know, ask them, you know, what can you be doing better? You know, everyone has room to improve.
Excellent. That's great. Deborah, what is your piece of practical advice?
I think empathy is extremely important during these times. Practice that, perfect it. You know, we're all struggling right now in different ways. Some people are isolated, you know, some people are all kinds of things that we're combating. So I think remember that, and I think that goes into the kind of flexibility conversations that we had, understanding that we need to be flexible and really give people that room that they need. And I think also vulnerability and authenticity, when you kind of mentioned that to begin, as you were talking, I think that those are important kind of pieces to practice as well, because I think the more that you're authentic in your communication with your team, the more that they really trust you and can come to you with questions and concerns. And so I think that those are really kind of great things to focus on and really kind of improve during these times.
Fantastic. That's great, great, great. Monet, what practical advice do you have?
So my practical advice is definitely self-reflection, continual learning. You can never not learn. You can never learn too much. So always continue your education in any type of way, whether it's learning how to make eggs or whatever, always stay learning. And then when it comes to transparency, I know we've brought that up a few times, but also with that transparency piece, give yourself some grace. If you made a mistake, do not beat yourself up for the rest of the month. You made a mistake. Okay, cool. Let's move on from it. You will be fine. People will forget that mistake. Give yourself some grace. Don't beat yourself up. Also, I don't know if we touched base on setting goals. Make sure you set measurable and attainable goals for yourself and also for your team. Very, very critical, especially your self goals, because you want to make sure that you are achieving, what you want in life. And we want to see more women in positions of leadership. We want to, make leadership more diverse. So even if that's not your goal, that's fine, but also figure out how to get yourself there and also help others get there. Also have a network of people to lean on. Always have a person. Right now, Ryan is my person. So I can call him, be stressed and lean on him for support. You will always need support. So definitely have a network of people that you can go to and vent to and talk about your problems and talk about decisions with, just to get that second opinion and to solidify your thought process. So those are my practical advices.
That's awesome, Monet. And I'm your person too. So anytime you need me, let me know. The last question I have before we get to the Q&A is just, we've spent, I think, most of this program talking about what feels or looks different right now, but I imagine that there are things that have remained true about leadership. And I imagine that this moment has, for each of you, emphasized something that was true prior to 2020 that you feel is still true today. So Erica, can you share one thing that's remained true about leadership through all of this uncertainty and change?
I think, that's our job. I think, it's just to lead your team.
Yeah.
And, through everything that's going on, because this is going to go away, event one day, is you have a job to serve your team and to serve your leadership, and is just fulfilling that role and not letting what's going on be an excuse to not do what you need to do. You almost have to bring it more.
That's awesome. Bring it more. Man, you're the t-shirt slogan person today. I swear. We're going to get these printed.
I'll get it all on Pinterest for you.
Yeah, good. Deborah, what has remained true for you about leadership? What are you still holding on to?
Eric, I think building on what you said, it's all about staying positive during these times and really being a positive light for your team, someone that they know that they can rely on, connect to. I think that that's critical. And, I also think that our responsibility in investing in the next generation of designers, I mentioned that kind of at the onset as a challenge, but I think that that is something that we all need to be even just extra conscious of and go above and beyond to kind of seek out those mentorship opportunities, seek out those students that might be looking for jobs, and just be a sounding board for them, help them create connections. And lastly, I think our connection to our mission and purpose as interior designers. I think that that is, you know, of course remains true through the test of time, but I think it's even more meaningful now, thinking about the way that the world is going to shift, the built environment is going to shift. I think we're really going to be coming out onto a very interesting and I think almost exciting time as we see kind of these changes happen and how we can help impact the built environment.
Awesome. Monet, what has remained true about leadership for you?
For me, it's just simply motivating and inspiring your team. So very simple. It was pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. Just make sure you're always motivating them and you're there for them and you're being an inspiration to them. So,
Beth, can you close us out? What's remained true about leadership for you before we get to the Q&A?
Sure. The leaders are sort of naturally creative problem solvers and lifelong learners. And so that really puts us in a position to be fast adapters. So I think that we're always the ones that are out there kind of leading the way and showing other people how the world is going to be, even in moments of utter chaos, like what happened last March when, you know, literally in 48 hours, our businesses all became virtual, right? And so there's a really good example of we all turned on a dime and the next day we were just conducting our business in a different way. So fast adapters. And I think that recognizing that we all work in a leaderful environment, and there's a lot of really good literature on this idea of a leaderful environment, but in a healthy workplace, the right kind of leader with the right skill set and capabilities, if allowed to, will emerge and really inform how the overall direction of a team. And I think that there is both inspiration and comfort in the fact that we don't have to be the only leader, that we need to be respectful of the fact that we are surrounded with and are working with leaders every day. And that also is a type of mentoring as well, is to give them an opportunity to be elevated into whatever situation they're working in and have those experiences firsthand, but maybe with someone working side by side with them, so they're not just out there skating on their own. So
yeah, that's that really gave me goosebumps, this idea that as leaders we can look around and see leaders in other people. That is awesome. I really, really appreciate that. We've got some questions that came in through the chat, so I want to spend the last 10 minutes doing those. A handful of them are similar, so I'm going to, and I hope the people won't be mad at me, but I'm going to lump them together just so we can try and get to as many as possible. But we had a couple of questions come in that were specifically about motivation. How are you motivating teams? How are you motivating people who maybe have lost some of their motivation? And how are you maybe helping people who don't exactly know how to self-motivate? You know, as a leader, you probably can't spend all of your time motivating each person individually. So how do you help people maybe find some of the motivation that the four of you obviously seem to, you know, have a pretty grasp on? So just generally talking about motivation, I think would be helpful for attendees. Erica, can we start with you?
Sure. I think it is just having an honest conversation with them, asking them, you know, what motivates you? You know, and everybody, it's a little different. You know, sometimes it's recognition. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's, you know, just being part of a team. But it is just having that honest conversation. You know, what are you struggling with? What can I do to help motivate you? And it may not necessarily be something you have to do for them. It could be pairing them with somebody. But, you know, some people just are not, they're just afraid to say something. Some people struggle with saying, I need help. And so, or they're not seeing that they need help. And so it's recognizing that for them and then just having that conversation.
That's great to hear. Deborah, how about you? What does this conversation kind of mean to you? I mean, you're so active in your chapter, you're active at work, you must be finding motivation all the time. What advice could you give for people who are attending?
Yeah, I love this. And I think, you know, it's really for me about celebrating the successes that the team has, that individuals have. I think it's now more important than ever to kind of just stop and say, okay, we finished this project. It was really successful. Let's celebrate this. if there's ways to share that project story and get your staff and team involved in that kind of authorship, I think hopefully will motivate them and remind them of our mission, their passion, and really kind of drive them forward. I think it's sometimes it's hard to stop and think about those things and take the time for those conversations, or that, virtual cocktail happy hour end of the project celebration. But I think that it's really critical now more than ever to keep people motivated and connected and feeling inspired.
That's great to hear. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Beth, I want to jump over to you with another question, and Monet too. We had a question come in that was about how do you measure success right now as a leader? What does it look like to do some of the things we've spent the last hour talking about? How are you kind of making sure to do gut checks with yourself to make sure that all the things you're sharing with them, you're doing and doing well?
Oh boy, I think that's a hard question on the fly.
No, it's all good. So anything that you can give, I think, would be valuable.
I think that just the thing that we've all been kind of talking about is recognizing the accomplishments of others. And this goes a little bit back to motivation too, is we all have different DNA and a different way of looking at what success is. I always like quantifiable goals. So setting quantifiable goals when you can ahead of time, then you've measured your success. But I think in a lot of what we do, the achievements are quality-based more than quantity-based. Some of them are, at least. And so sort of celebrating those moments when you see them. And one for me is when I realize that we've been successful in actually moving a client from a place where they were to a place where they aspired to be. And that's oftentimes a qualitative thing. But isn't that the most wonderful thing you've ever had happen to you? It's like, oh my gosh, they were actually listening. They really got something out of this. And they're going to be able to have a more productive or a healthier workplace or whatever as a result of that. So I think those are a couple things.
That's great to hear. Monet, anything to add real quick about how you measure success personally? You've mentioned goals a couple of times, things like that.
Yeah, I agree with Beth. It's that goal piece. Like you write out your goals, at the beginning of the year, the quarter, and, go back and look at that list and make sure that you were able to check things off. Also, I typed in the chat, don't be afraid to ask your team for feedback. And I think Erica kind of touched base on that too. How am I doing as your supervisor? Do you feel that you need more attention? Do you feel like I'm not addressing your concerns? What is it that you need? I feel like if you have a team that's happy and they are motivated to do their work, that means you're doing something right. Sometimes, you just don't know if you're doing a good job or not. But looking at the outputs, looking at, what your team is able to produce, that's a good measure. Looking at those goals that you created for your team and for yourself, that's a good way to evaluate how you're doing. And just getting that feedback, I feel like, and even peer-to-peer feedback, like if you have, if the person you report to can give you honest feedback, that's a good piece as well, and even your colleagues. So don't be afraid to ask. A lot of us sometimes don't want to hear that constructive feedback, but be open to it and really have a listening ear. And if you're doing your job well, it'll show. It'll show later with your outputs for the job or the task. And like I said earlier, give yourself some grace. If you fall a little short, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. You're doing a great job. You're in a leadership position for a reason.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to remember. Deborah, I want to jump over to you with a question that came in through the Q&A. Somebody's asking about being a leader on their local chapter board, and they're one of the younger people on the board. So what advice do we have as they continue to look forward towards growing on the board and maybe advancing into other roles or being more active? What advice do you have?
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think, don't, even though you might be in a young professional kind of starting out, don't be afraid to voice your thoughts and be open to that kind of dialogue with the group. You have just as much value as the next guy, whether it's in conversations with your chapter or at your firm, we all bring something to the table that's valuable, and we can all learn from each other. So, you know, make sure that you share those thoughts. And I would say also kind of spend time maybe exploring what you're most passionate about as you think about what that role could look like for you long term. I've kind of found over the years that I'm most successful when I'm doing something or talking about something that I'm most passionate about, and I'm more likely to execute those things and follow through with them and really feel satisfied and fulfilled by them. So I think, you know, really understanding what drives you is critical to kind of help put you in the right position to be successful.
That's terrific to hear. I want to try and do one last question here real quick before we close it out. Erica, I'm going to come to you. We had a question come in through the chat about micromanaging. I think we've given everybody attending a ton of things that they can do practically as leaders. I feel like maybe there's a little fear of doing all of them or too many of them and landing in the world of micromanagement. So it seems like you've been pretty successful at avoiding that. I would just love to hear your thoughts on how you do all of these in the right balance and the right ratio.
Yeah, I mean, I think every good leader is fearful of being a micromanager. And I think it really comes down to trusting your team, having faith in your team, and believing in your team, and knowing that they, you know, you hire people for a certain position because you want them to be in that position. And so you inherently have to trust them to do their job. That doesn't mean you're not checking on them. That doesn't mean you're not inquiring, but just letting them do it. And then, you know, it's checking in. Hey, how's that going? You know, nobody likes to be micromanaged. And I don't think, you know, I think people sometimes like to micromanage, but that's not a successful leader to me. And so if you have the right people in the right role, you shouldn't have to micromanage them. And if you do, then that the person's not in the right role, and you need to find a different person.
I just want to thank Erica, Deborah, Monet, and Beth again for joining me. I really appreciate it. I learned so much during this panel. I'm so glad I chose to moderate it because it was really helpful to me.